I am Ludovic Bonland, the Nature-Based Solution Mainstreaming Advisor at SPC, and I'm very happy to welcome you all to this significant event today for the Regional Capacity Building Assessments Lunch webinar. Today I will co-chair the meeting with Mrs. Mathilde Kraft from SPREP, a Project Regional Developer Coordinator for the Kiwa initiative. As you have seen in the video before, we will ask you to remain mute, and we will have a few dedicated Q&A sessions where you will be asked to raise your hand if you have any question or any messages you would like to share with us. Can you hear me, everyone? Seems to be okay. Someone says that okay, perfect. So before we start and before we going through the agenda, I would like to give like a little bit of context. Today we will focus on an issue of great importance for the Pacific, the resilience of Pacific Island countries and territories in the face of the challenges posed by climate change. We are all aware that the Pacific region, which is characterized by its breathtaking and beauty and unique ecosystem biodiversity, is unfortunately no stranger to the devastating impacts of cyclones, floods, droughts, sea level rise, and a range of other natural calamities due to climate change. These events have far-reaching consequences, affecting not only the physical landscape, but also the very core of societies, economies, and cultures. What we see is that year after year, these small island nations grapple with the harsh reality of substantial economic, but also non-economic losses inflicted by climate change, damaging vital sectors such as housing, infrastructure, agriculture, fisheries, tourism, but also culture itself. Today, we need to recognize nature-based solution as a key strategy for climate change adaptation, biodiversity protection, and the enhancement of human well-being. As defined by IUCN, nature-based solution encompass transformative approach that taps into the protective and restorative capabilities of both natural and modified ecosystems. By aligning these solutions with our efforts to combat climate change, reduce disaster risks, secure food and water supplies, safeguard biodiversity, and improve human health, we will position ourselves on a path towards sustainable economic development. The Kiwa initiative represents a multi-donor program designed to bolster the resilience of Pacific Island ecosystem, communities, and economies through the strategic deployment of nature-based solutions. The Kiwa initiative is actively helping and supporting Pacific Island states and territories to become more resilient to climate change by offering financial support and practical guidance for projects based on nature-based solutions. SPC and SPREP are now in charge of providing a complete training program around nature-based solutions to help people build their skills as part of the Kiwa Regional Technical Assistance. It is therefore crucial for us to recognize that the true capacity development has to be a transformative process, one that empowers individual leaders, organizations, and societies in order to take ownership of their future. During this regional capacity building needs assessment that we will present today, we aim to better understand what are the specific capacity building needs and priorities of local and national public authorities, civil society representatives, communities, and NGOs from the 19 Kiwa eligible PICs for, first of all, developing, implementing, and monitoring nature-based solution projects that prioritize inclusivity, gender sensitivity, and of course, adherence to human rights. And the second objective is to better mainstream these forward-looking approaches into strategies for climate change adaptation and relevant sectorial policies. So as I say, during today's webinar, we will share the key information related to this regional capacity needs assessment. We will leave significant room for dedicated Q&A session after each of the main components of the presentation to receive your comments, your answer, your feedback, your questions. And in addition, we will launch a very quick polls to collect your feedbacks. It is now time for me to share today's agenda. And so to do so, I will share my screen. So the meeting today is expected to last about an hour 30, maybe a bit more if we have a lot of questions. We booked a 2-hour slot for it. So today I'm joined with Mr. Maeshal, a technical coordinator of the Kiwa Secretariat, who will start by presenting some key updates on the Kiwa initiative. Then we will have Mrs. Sarah Emstock, who has been our lead consultant for this regional capacity needs assessment, who will present the methodologies that has been used. Then I will present what are the main findings of this assessment. We will have time for a Q&A session. Then Mathilde will present what are the main recommendations for capacity building. Again, we'll have another Q&A session at the end of this presentation. And we will finish with a presentation of the relevant opportunities that has been drawn up from the assessment report and that we would like to implement as part of the Kiwa technical assistance. So please, again, remain on mute. If you have any question, you can start to write them down in the chat box, or you can wait the Q&A session and raise your hand at this time. Once again, I would like to extend my gratitude for every one of you who have joined us this morning. And I now give the floor to May.
Thank you, Ludovic. Good morning, everyone. Dear representatives of the Pacific Island countries and territories, dear Kiwa donors, dear Kiwa partners, and dear participants. So on behalf of the Kiwa Secretariat and on behalf of the French Development Agency, which is in charge of managing the Kiwa initiative, I'd also like to welcome you all to this important, very exciting milestone in the frame of the Kiwa initiative implementation. So in the Kiwa inception phase before 2020, the Pacific Island countries and territories have expressed a series of different needs to the donors, and including a need for a simplified access to climate adaptation funds. To answer those needs, the Kiwa donors have worked together, have merged together to propose a program that offers different opportunities. That includes local and regional project funding opportunities, and also technical assistance to the Pacific Island countries and territories. In other words, one of the originality of the Kiwa initiative is to walk on 2 legs. We have the project and the technical assistance, with the involvement of our partners, SPC, SPREP and IUCN regional office. At this stage, 5 regional projects and 18 local projects have been selected and have started across 16 Pacific Island countries and territories after different calls for projects. New project will be selected and new calls for project, both local and regional project, will be launched this year as well. In the frame of this technical assistance, both SPC and SPREP are involved in providing support to their members, Pacific Island countries and territories, in terms of project identification and development, but also to provide capacity building on different important topics at different scales and using different modalities for mainstreaming nature-based solutions in national and regional policies and frameworks, and also for developing and managing effective nature-based solution projects. What brings us together today relates to the capacity building component. In order to better understand the needs for capacity building and to identify the relevant modalities, it has been decided to start with the first step, being a needs assessment. So as Ludovic mentioned, this is going to be presented today, both in terms of how it has been conducted, and we'd like to thank you, all of you who have contributed to this collective work, including the consultant team, and also what we can learn from this step to identify the different opportunities that could be funded through Kiwa. As you know, there is a wide range of topics that are linked to what are now known and defined as nature-based solutions for climate adaptation. So unsurprisingly, the needs are diverse. Aligning with the Kiwa initiative, few priorities have been identified. Let me mention a few of them. One of them is that the Pacific Island countries and territories should be the priority target groups to benefit from the Kiwa capacity building program. Also, the activities that are going to be presented need to be complementary to existing capacity building activities and to learn from existing capacity activities on similar topics, so that the specific contribution of the Kiwa initiative is clear. And third, there is a need to monitor the results from this program and different activities. So today we're very happy to be able to share with you this information. Please note that this information has been shared with the Kiwa donors at the previous steering committee meeting in May in Suva, and we are happy to exchange with you on those results. We're looking forward to the implementation of the Kiwa capacity building activities to respond to the identified needs. I will now just provide a very quick overview of the Kiwa initiative. For those of you who have not been able to learn from it, we invite you to visit our website, kiwainitiative.org, for any updates and general information as well. So in a nutshell, the Kiwa initiative gathers these 5 donors, France, the European Union, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia. It has been launched in 2020 and now includes a budget of 75 million euros. It's targeted at supporting effective climate adaptation solution using healthy ecosystems. 19 eligible countries and territories include 16 Pacific Island countries and French territories. There are 3 components in this program: the very small to medium-sized grants managed by the IUCN Oceania Regional Office, large regional grants, and technical assistance, which is what we're talking about today. So in this you can see the different key information as regards both regional, local projects, eligibility, conditions, funds, and where does the technical assistance come from. Just a few words on nature-based solutions. So they've been defined by IUCN as action to protect, sustainably manage and restore natural and modified ecosystems that address societal challenges effectively and adaptively. So in the standards from the IUCN, NBS must address at least one of the following societal challenges. There are many of them. And in the Kiwa initiative, we focus mainly on adaptation, but also on different others. What is important to keep in mind is that nature-based solution must deliver both human well-being and biodiversity benefits. Next slide, you will see an example of categories of different nature-based solutions and list of concepts that are linked to this wider concept of nature-based solutions. So these will be well known to some of them, to some of you, sorry. Yeah, so I will leave it now to the SPC and SPREP team to present the capacity development need assessment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. I'm actually going to leave the floor to Ms. Sarah Hemstad. So Sarah, with a team of 6 local consultants, has been leading this work from the UK. So thank you so much, Sarah, for joining. I'll let you the floor.
Okay, thank you. Just managed to cope with the technology there and unmute myself. So thank you everyone for listening to this, and thank you, Mehi, for the introduction, and to Matilda and Ludo for the opportunity to talk to you about the methodology we used. We had a team of 9 consultants working on this, based across 7 of the 19 Kiwa eligible countries. So we had a pretty good coverage. So just firstly, to look at the objectives of our capacity development gaps and needs assessment. And then I'm going to talk you through the methodology. I'm not going to cover any findings. I'm going to leave that to the other team. I'm just going to explain what we did and why we did it. So essentially, our job was to identify capacity building needs of local and national stakeholders from the 19 Kiwa eligible countries and French overseas countries and territories. So this was to enable people to develop, implement and monitor rights-based, gender-sensitive and socially inclusive nature-based solutions projects, specifically focusing around climate change adaptation and biodiversity conservation. And then we were looking at mainstreaming, we were looking at capacity developing for mainstreaming these approaches into climate change adaptation and other relevant sectoral policies and strategic frameworks. So, excuse me, we were basically working on 2 levels. We were looking at technical issues, and we were also looking at how within like the governance systems, these can be mainstreamed. So yeah, next slide, please. So as I say, we had a team of 9 consultants, 7 of whom were Pacific Islanders based in 6 different countries. We carried out in-country workshops. We did 2 surveys, one focused on gender and social inclusion, and the other one focused on key topics for nature-based solutions for climate change adaptation. And we had respondents from all Kiwa countries. I'm going to go into this in a little bit more detail. And we also carried out key informant interviews at all levels. Okay, so our key findings, not the findings all, the key elements of the methodology. So why we took an approach to the workshops that covered Melanesia, Micronesia and Polynesia. Why did we do that? Well, because dealing with 19 countries and territories was a huge task, and we have a whole variety of different educational and training systems within that collection of countries. So we can start out saying Palau is aligned with US educational systems. So there's a whole series of countries that are looking at US educational systems. Tuvalu in the middle, basically, they use UK, Australia, New Zealand and Fiji educational systems. Vanuatu has its own frameworks for education, but it carries out education in French and English. Solomon Islands is aligned with UK and Pacific. Kiribati is aligned very much with Australia. So we've got a whole range of educational systems, but we've also got some quality assurance provided across the region by the Educational Quality Assessment Programme. And they've partnered to provide regional frameworks, quality standards, etc., that are acceptable across the region. So we had to do coverage that basically incorporated very, very diverse educational systems, very diverse approaches to training, etc., etc. So that's why we did a broad coverage across Melanesia, Micronesia and Polynesia. And we undertook consultations in a very highly participatory manner to ensure that we got everything covered. Sometimes I think we covered too much, but anyway, all the information's there. We looked at things at regional, national and subnational levels. And we had in-country workshops. We had 2 types of survey delivered in English and French. And we did a whole series of interviews, and we used like what's called a snowballing technique. So we carried on going, looking at, we started off with a set of stakeholders. So we took a stakeholder-based approach. We got stakeholders from SPC, SPREP, people who were currently leading regional projects. So we gathered up stakeholders from all those. we gathered up stakeholders from civil society representatives across the different countries and government representatives, etc., and we carried on interviewing until we were receiving no more new information. And we carried on with the surveys until we were getting no more new information. So we're quite happy that we have covered basically every element. And we also took a really broad approach. So we looked at, you know, surrounding policies and everything like that. We didn't want to take a siloed approach. So we went with the FRDP idea about creating a Pacific movement for resilience building. So we looked at disaster risk management, disaster risk reduction, climate change adaptation, food security, water security, energy security, everything that had an impact where nature-based solutions for climate for basically could have an impact on any of those sectors that would bring benefits for climate change adaptation. And so within that, we did a stakeholder analysis to identify all the relevant stakeholders, as I've said. And we had very much, we took a very much gender sensitive and socially inclusive approach. And we also, as well as doing quantitative analysis, we also made sure that people were having equal say on ideas and information that were coming into developing the needs and gaps analysis. So we finished up getting representation from 316 people across the region, 45% of whom identified as male, 53% as female, and 2% as non-binary or preferred not to say. So we're quite happy that we had a broad, you know, very broad coverage and good, you know, inclusion from vulnerable groups. Yeah, and as I say, the surveys and everything were done in English and French to ensure we got good coverage. So we also integrated lessons learned from other similar capacity development programs, and we looked at formal, non-formal training. We looked at how training modalities, we looked at people's training preferences, and how training could be provided using existing experience and existing provision at different institutions. And we also looked at what was needed in order to build capacity of, you know, local institutions and or communities or NGOs that are working directly with communities to ensure that everything was covered in the capacity needs and gap analysis. So I'll leave it there, okay? And I'm happy to answer any questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. If you could mute your mic so that we can go ahead. Thank you so much for explaining the methodologies that has been used for this assessment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Before we moving to the main finding of the report, I just have two information just to say that we'll try and to speak as slow as possible to allow our interpreters to interpret. And in addition to that, I also wanted to share with you the fact that following this meeting, we will share with all the participants the executive summary of the report, and the full report will be available by next week on our relevant website, either SPC, SPREP, or the Kiwa initiative one. So let's get through the main findings of this report, which are numerous. And I would like to start with the policy review that has been conducted at both regional and national scale. Let's have a look first at the regional policy landscape for nature-based solution. The key information that we witnessed is that nature-based solution, ecosystem-based adaptation, and biodiversity conservation are well integrated into regional frameworks, such as the Framework for Resilient Development in the Pacific Island Framework for Nature Conservation and Protected Area, as well as Pacific Resilience Standards. What the consultant have been able to see as well is that in the region, nature-based solution activities are primarily funded through public development aid and from external donors. And these activities are most of the time implemented by NGOs, regional organizations, and to a lesser extent in sometimes by local government and communities. About the type of activities that we can see in the region related to nature-based solutions that include biodiversity conservation, climate resilient food systems, coastal protection, which is, as you may all know, one of the urgent issues that we are facing, riverbank stabilization, water security measures, and invasive species management, in addition also to awareness raising activities and education. It is important also to note the fact that these regional frameworks emphasize the need to link traditional knowledges with modern approaches. But I will get back on this point a little bit later. If we now look at the national landscape policy review, the context is a little bit different, despite the fact that we recognize that many national adaptation plans and climate change policies recognize ecosystem-based approaches and biodiversity conservation. The nature-based solution terminology itself is rarely mentioned. So there is still a way to increase awareness and to make accepted this terminology. We also witness that there is a siloed national governance, I'll get back on that shortly, and limited awareness for decision makers about the potential of nature-based solution to meet regional and national development objectives. And last but not least, there is still often a perception that engineered solutions are superior to natural solutions, which demonstrate again the need to increase understanding about the nature-based solution context. I just would like to take a few seconds to comment the graph on the right that some of you may be familiar with, which presents the Sustainable Development Goals. And the way it is presented demonstrates that biosphere activities, anything related to biosphere, are considered as a prerequisite to achieve other sustainable development goals. That is to say that nature-based solution and nature in general, biodiversity, plays a key and fundamental role in reaching this development target. Now that we had a look at the policies in the region and nationally, the SARA teams also been able to define and identify what are the main challenges for implementation of nature-based solution activities. In the next slide, I will go through the challenge to implement capacity building more specifically. One of the main common issues that we face in the region is that there is a lack of human capacities, a lack in terms of numbers, but also a lack in terms of technical capacities and skills. Lack of numbers, because as we know, all the countries in the region have different situations. And in many cases, when it comes to the public staff working on these issues, the team are fairly small. They receive a lot of demand. And unfortunately, even if they would like to, they are often in a situation when it's difficult for them to address these demands properly. In addition to that, when we are talking about nature-based solutions, which cover, as we explained earlier, a wide range of topics, further technical training and technical skills are required to allow for better monitoring and implementation of these projects. We talked before about the lack of awareness for decision makers, but this applies also for communities, for example. And that's why it is very important to link it with traditional knowledge. The idea not being to introduce a new complex term, but based on what is done in the Pacific region when it comes to nature-based solution, it is intrinsically usually linked to traditional knowledges. In terms of finance, which is also one of the key aspects, we need money to implement these activities. What we see as challenges is that usually the project cycles can be seen as too short. Often they are about 3 to 5 years timeline, where for such ecosystem activities, longer period will be ideal. But we understand that the different issues that we may have to increase such project cycle. Every funding window also have their own criteria and therefore some strict rules to follow. And not all funding windows are suitable for different activities. There is also limited research, and it's difficult for research projects to get funding, but it's also very important for us to better understand the challenges we are facing, the specific context. And so that's why we need to increase data collection as well. In terms of implementation itself, as I quickly said before, there is a national siloed governance which hamper the national cooperation. Different ministries are working with projects that are dealing to activities linked to nature-based solution. It can be Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries, of Climate Change, Infrastructure, Environment. But there is often a lack of coordination, national coordination, and that's something that can slow down and minimize the impact of such project, when by definition they need to be integrated. The Pacific region is one big region, but which has a lot of specificities, cultural specificities, and sometimes, often we need to adapt our activities, our communication with the communities we are working with. So language barrier can be seen as a challenge in some cases. Often, we also see that traditional governance and tenure systems are overlooked. And again, that's a finding and a recommendation to better capitalize on what is existing and using existing governance systems rather than trying to develop new ones that will just increase complexities. And last, like I say, yes, we need to produce more and to get access to more climate data. In terms of challenges now for implementation of capacity building and trainings, here are the main findings from the team, is that a lot of trainings are project-based trainings, which can be seen as unsustainable beyond the project cycle. What remains after the project is finalized. There is also a lack of local trainers to be able to take over this training on a longer term run. In terms of gender equality and disability and social inclusion, JETSI, it's still often lacking or not as strengthened as it should be in the projects. And so there is a need to increase training and capacities into that space. And that's something that within the Kiwa initiative, we are trying to do, providing specific JETSI technical assistance for all eligible and members of the Kiwa initiative. There is also for training a challenge in logistic because we are all in remote places. And so sometimes we need to think about how we relocate our training to reach all these populations that are disseminated around the region. There is also a high employee turnover in public administration that demands there is a continuous need for training and capacity building. That's why more than ever we need to have sustainable training options. When we look at formal trainings, postgraduate courses, They usually have prerequisites, which can limit the number of beneficiaries, because sometimes some professional doesn't meet the prerequisite criteria and are, excluded from accessing these courses. Again, we have the language barrier and cultural differences that needs to be taken into account while developing a training. And sometimes translation can be relevant in order to speak the same language with people who first language is not English. And also, surprisingly, we witness that NGOs and NGO staff struggle a little bit to get access to formal training as well. That's why they often go for informal training. Let's now have a look at more specific issue. I briefly mentioned some specific point about it, but what about gender equality, disability, and social inclusion? What we see is that there is a challenge for participation of this population in such training. Some of the reasons are that the course timing may not be appropriate in some cases. There is a biased perception about what they need, who will attend, how they will attend, and sometimes some very basic support are needed, just like a childcare provision, for example, to allow women to attend some specific training at specific times. There is also in-house, in projects, a lack of capacity and skills to design and manage JETSI plans. That's why, again, we need to increase the skills into that space. And even if we advocate for integrating and increasing linkages between traditional knowledges and nature-based solution programs, it is often seen as unsuccessful because it is usually thought afterwards when the implementation already started, where it's more recommended, obviously, to think about it as upstream as possible and directly from the project design phase. And that's why it is crucial to form strong collaboration with local communities, but of course, it requires some time. Just would like to have a look before moving to the next slide at what are the general challenges faced by the region. We already mentioned quite a few, but just to note that there is a growing urbanizations with increasing number of informal settlements and actions that impact ecosystems. Of course, the Pacific is one of the most vulnerable regions to climate impacts, disasters, and still have a gap in terms of capacities. There is a lot of pressure on the food, water, energy, waste, and marine health. And in addition to that, we are in a context a little bit complex where land and sea tenures are often under customary protection. There is a need to engage further in resource management collectively. So now that we went through the policy landscape, the challenges for NBS activities capacity building, I would like to go through the findings for the training modalities. We identify two main types of training modalities, which are the formal one and the informal one. And what you can see on the slide is a SWOT analysis, a summary of the SWOT analysis, to present what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities of this formal training. What we call formal training is a training that will lead to formal certification and keep a trace for people who benefit from this training that can be valuable later and demonstrate that they receive such training. One of the strengths in the region is that we can use the Educational Quality Assessment Program, ECAP, from SPC that offer regional qualification accreditation that will stay over time and that any training provider, such as regional and national university, can then deliver. I will get back on this later today, but this regional qualification It's providing kind of a blueprint, a framework for training providers to deliver, and it will stay over time. That's a difference with the informal training. Local providers offer contextualized delivery, and that's why it's good to use our existing capacities in the region. There is some existing material qualification already, and the idea is to use this one, update them when needed, but in order to avoid duplication and reinventing the wheel as much as possible, we recommend to capitalize on what is existing. On another side, there is some weaknesses to this formal training. There, as I mentioned, you can see there is a high staff turnover at management level, meaning that there is a need to continuously offer capacity building opportunities. We need qualified trainers in countries to provide face-to-face delivery. And sometimes the cons of that is that new qualification or even macro qualification can be expensive. For full qualification, we talk about a few $100,000 and more than a year in some cases. Nevertheless, again, there is existing model like the TVET qualifications. There is funding opportunity through existing projects for scholarships that is good to use. And there is also, it is this formal training, an opportunity to enhance the capacity of the local providers. Without further ado, I moved to the non-formal trainings. As I mentioned a little bit before, this non-formal training, which are usually project-based, demonstrated to be effective in face-to-face delivery, especially in community settings. They are highly effective for general awareness and achieving specific project outcomes because they are quick to organize, quick to deliver, and very cost-effective as well. The cons of this non-formal training is that it can be seen as unsustainable beyond the project cycle, focusing too much on project deliverables rather than focusing more on individual capacity development. There is a lack of quality control sometimes because it is based on project for the development. It has a limited impact on employment prospects, meaning that you just have a certificate when you complete this non-formal training, but nothing very official. And it often rely on external training provider and consultants, where formal training rather use existing training capacity, delivery capacities. It's easy to implement online, to use innovative pedagogy. There is also opportunity to include JETSI elements. But again, we see that there is a shortage of local trainers, a challenge about the ownership of these trainings that are developed within project. What do we do with it while the project is done? How do we make the dissemination efficient? How do we share these resources? And with a lack of funding post-project, it can be a real challenge. So now that we look at the training modalities, to finish on the main finding, I would like to have a look on the delivery modalities that are either on face-to-face or online. Of course, both modalities have pros and cons. And it is up to us to find the right modalities to achieve the right objectives. So when you look at the face-to-face, we agree that it suits skill development, behavior change, cross-functional collaboration, one-shot workshops. That works really well. And it's effective for both formal and non-formal education and training. It is seen as preferred modality by most of the person we interviewed as part of this assessment, and it is specifically true for communities. This face-to-face modalities allows also training provider to adapt to the local context and to the language, being in face-to-face with the beneficiaries. It is often used for vulnerability assessments or workshops, climate change activities, and knowledge exchanges. It's also one of the benefits also compared to the online one is that when you gather with people for one or few days, it's easier to increase your networking and your knowledge exchange as well. What we witness is that there is usually a high participant reach and frequency, but it is costly because you need to provide per diem accommodation, transportation, and so on. In terms of online modalities, it suits remote meetings. It is cost saving to organize an online meeting. It doesn't cost very much in comparison to face-to-face. It is effective for micro-learning, for lecturers, for such meeting as we're having today, for example, or to raise awareness, for example, for a very key specific topic or to share key messages. The online modalities is also suited for postgraduate and specialized training in the Pacific. Nevertheless, there is some logistic challenges in terms of internet connectivities, the affordability to get internet access, to get the right device also in some remote places, it is still a challenge. And sometimes, even if you do have the access to internet, access to the device, in many places, the the internet coverage can be very limited and have issue for people to participate. I will be shortly done. In addition to all of this, the consultant team also looked at what are the potential synergies with other programs, and they have been able to identify 31 ongoing projects with related capacity development initiative in the region. Some of them are the PIPIN, Promoting Pacific Island Nature-Based Solution, managed by IUCN with SPC, SPREP, and GGI. We have the Climate Resilient by Nature, implemented by WWF Australia and financed by Australia, and also other big regional projects such as PUMP, Biopama, or GCCA+, or even PACRES, which I guess you are all familiar with. There is also opportunity to increase synergies with the existing training provider and tertiary training institution. So that is good to know that we can work with them more closely and use the existing mechanism for regional accreditation or micro qualification. That's my last slide, and then after we will open the floor for Q&A. But that's a good transition for the next presentation for Mathilde about what are the main recommendations, now that we looked at what are the main findings. As part of this regional assessment, okay, sorry, just a technical. So we define, the consultants have defined different categories of stakeholders for the two main objectives that we are trying to reach as part of this Kiwa capacity building program. As mentioned earlier by Sarah, the first objective is to better develop, implement, and monitor NBS project. And the consultant have defined two main categories that we need to target to reach this objective, who are the managers, nature-based solution managers, which are those involved in planning, monitoring, and management of nature-based solution projects. In addition to that, you have the technical practitioners, those involved in the implementation itself. For the second objective, to mainstream nature-based solution in climate change strategies and relevant sectoral policies, we have identified two key categories of stakeholders. The first one being the decision makers, high-level decision makers at national and local level, and also communities, which are the picked communities members. I won't go through the recommendation. I will leave that to Mathilde. But it is now time for you to raise your hand or write in the chat box if you have any question you would like to share with us. We have time for it. The idea is really to exchange, to receive your comment, your feedback, or lesson learned, or anything you would like to share with us about what we presented. So the floor is yours. And following that, we will launch the quick poll. So you just need to raise your hand, and then after we will open your mic. Yes, as mentioned by our support, you need to raise hand function by clicking on the reaction tab at the bottom of the Zoom window. So we do have a question in the chat or a remark from Sangeeta. Maybe if you're okay with that, I can read your question. I mean, your comment, Sangeeta, and I can provide some inputs. Sangeeta says that there is much interest in learning between projects peer-to-peer, and if so, through what type of mechanism? We do have a few mechanisms to do so, and thank you for your remarks, Sangeeta. You, of course, more than right. Thanks to the Kiwa initiative, we are developing now a consistent Kiwa communities, working on regional and national projects, covering now 16 PICs in the region. So the idea is to use these communities within the frame of Kiwa to exchange, and that will be also part of our technical assistance component. Starting by the end of this year, but at least next year, we will emphasize organizing some lesson learned and capitalization meetings in order to benefit for every project to benefit from others and to increase knowledge exchange. In addition to that, I'm happy to, I mean, for some of you who may not be aware, SPC, SPREP, and IUCN are co-chairing a newly created nature-based solution working group, which include a lot of practitioners, regional practitioners for NBS, and it is hosted under the Pacific Island Roundtable. And one of the main objectives of this working group is to gather together and to increase regional coordination around nature-based solutions in order to avoid any duplication and increase added value. It works pretty well so far, and this working group has been officially launched early this year. So it's still in the process of finding the way it works and so on. I hope that answers your question, Sangeeta. François has raised his hand. François, the floor is yours.
Merci Ludovic, and good morning everyone. Thank you for this very insightful presentation, Ludovic, Mathilde, and Sarah. Thank you, Kiwa, for allowing this assessment to be done. And the question is, are you indeed hopeful that the resources will be available soon for significant capacity building opportunities? And I'm asking this question just for a little bit of context. I'm starting a Kiwa-funded project in New Caledonia, regional project PBAC Plus by SPREP. And I'm meeting with public authorities and a number of other stakeholders. And some individuals are saying to me, oh, we don't understand NBS and we need to learn NBS. Some others are saying, oh, NBS is just the same thing that nature conservation has always been, so it's just a new packaging. And then they realize when talking to me, oh, that might be a little bit different. So thank you for all what you said today. I think it's very insightful. And the question is, are you indeed hopeful that resources will be available for capacity building? Indeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question, François. A few elements to answer. First of all, like I said earlier, we will share with you all the executive summary of this assessment following this meeting. For those who may haven't received it, we will launch the full report next week on our website, SPC, Kiwa, and SPREP website. In terms of development of material, we do have now a draft program that we will present to you. We still need to get approval from the Kiwa donors, but of course, the Kiwa projects such as PBAC will be the first beneficiaries, but not only, of this Kiwa capacity building program. PBAC is a good example of projects that include capacity building activities that can finance some of these activities. And we are, I mean, you raised a very interesting point. We didn't want to go into too much detail at the introduction when we presented nature-based solution, but you're right. One of the key questions we often have is what makes nature-based solution different from conservation approaches? There is a number of answers to that. The first one that I like to give is that it's a matter of scale. First of all, when we look at nature-based solution, we are looking at the landscapes scale, not only the ecosystem one. And what makes also nature-based solution have an added value compared to traditional conservation activities is also the co-benefits that it provides in terms of biodiversity and human well-being. And when we talk about human well-being, it's all JETSI, socioeconomic developments are numerous, and they must be part of the nature-based solution aspect, as well as the mainstreaming. That's why we decided to target this as one of the main objectives of this capacity building program. For those who are familiar with the nature-based solution standards, mainstreaming, biodiversity outcome, socioeconomic outcomes are part of the standards, and that's what makes NBS a bit not different, but having an added value from conservation approaches. So of course we will have all this material. We will focus on this different point, and I don't want to step in too much on Mathilde's presentation, but there is a recommendation going into that direction, François. Thank you for the great question. So we have Vi from SPREP, who shared with us on the chat a community of practice on NBS with some examples. So thank you so much for that, Vi. I invite you to have a look at the link that has been shared. And we do have a question from Soseaila. The floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for that very informative and insightful presentation from the Kiwa team. My take is around the sustainability of capacity building, especially through projects. Because speaking from experience, one of the big gap is that. Because as we all know that projects only last for some 3 years, some 4 years, and then there's no more funding for capacity building. So my question is, do you have any exit strategy, like to continue on building capacity? Thank you. Oh, I can't hear you.
Going to provide like just a few answers. Yes. And I will give the floor to Sarah if she has some key element about it. I think that's one of the key points that she raised in this full report, is that again it's about sustainability, and that's why we will try within Kiwa to consider that having micro qualifications that will last way beyond project cycles. We will also, the way we will host the training material on our respective website, we allow also for users to get an ongoing access to it. But I know Sarah is really well involved in this topic. So maybe Sarah, if you would like to give a few words and feedback from what you've seen and what you know about this sustainability issue. Yeah, I give you, yes, you should be able to. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, thank you. So yes, one of the key findings from looking at literature and things that have happened over the years is that obviously training that's offered on a non-formal basis through projects is not sustainable. So one of the key findings of this, hopefully, I don't want to tread on Matilda's toes at all, but just to answer this question, is that if you incorporate that training into a formal educational system using the institutions that you've got, those qualifications will be available way after the project is finished. Not only that, you'll be building the capacity of local institutions to deliver specialized training, you know, if we're talking about NBS. And if we look at examples of what's happened, there was a project that wasn't really an educational project that set up a PhD, MSc, and PG DIP, so like quite high level qualifications, postgraduate qualifications in climate change adaptation. And those are still continuing. That was at USP. That's yeah, probably getting on for 10 years ago now when that first started, and they've continued and grown from strength to strength. Also, more recently, there was looking at vocational level qualification in communities, looking at climate change adaptation or resilience, building resilience in communities. Those have gone on from strength to strength. So after that project closed, that project developed qualifications at levels 1 to 4. Another project after that has developed qualifications at levels 5 to 6. Two other projects, PAC-RES is one, and the other one's to do with disaster risk management, have developed micro qualifications using the frameworks set up by the original EU PAC-TVET project. So they all indicate that that approach is sustainable after projects close. So there's been, you know, work done on, excuse me, disaster risk management, logistics, and team leadership. There's been work done on micro qualifications on fisheries, community fisheries, and a whole lot of micro qualifications that look at improving livelihoods and improving fisheries management. And then there's like the larger vocational qualifications that have gone on to build. And also, just to make it clear to people, we're not talking about students going along and staying 2 years on a course. We're talking about there's a whole range of like universities and training colleges and community colleges throughout the Pacific that can deliver courses to a cohort of people. So, you know, a project gets together, a group for training. You can look at, you know, you can look at what training needs to be delivered, etc. And you can do that. So we're not talking about students going to college. We're talking about training, regional training providers providing training that is appropriate for both the project needs and the needs of the people that are being trained. So I'll shut up anyway. So formal qualifications, yes, they are sustainable. Sorry, my voice is going. Sorry. I talk too much.
We will now start the poll. So I will stop sharing my screen and I will let Mathilde to launch it.
Thank you, Ludo, and thank you, Sarah, for making my job later easier on explaining the role of formal education. We would just like to get a bit of feedback from you. Really want to have this participative approach and sort of confront the findings to your experience as well. So I hope you're all happy to use the Mentimeter that we've sent in the chat, and you can also access it through the QR code here. We're not going to spend too much time about it. It was just first question is really, we're wondering how relevant you find these this presentation to the main findings and conclusions from the report regarding capacity needs in terms of topics, but also in terms of challenges and barriers. So it is reassuring to see that most of respondents agree and that the findings are consistent with your knowledge and experience. Also very happy to see that most of you agree that you can use these in your projects. This is really the objective for us for this report. It was a lot of work from Sarah and her team, from us and from other respondents, and we really wanted to have it as a tool for the region for capacity development in general, for resilience building. And yes, we hoped that they were also a bit challenging the way we usually do. And I think the Soyasa remark on the sustainability problem of it sort of talks to this idea of how we usually do the sort of ad hoc project approach. So thank you all to the respondents. I think I'll stop it here, and we'll go into now the actual recommendations from the report. So building on Ludovic's presentation on the main findings, the way we've approached the recommendations and how Sarah and her team have presented their recommendations is really practical in a sense, where we want, they've developed a menu of activities that they recommend for Kiwa, but more generally speaking, a menu of activities that are considered will answer the needs of the region. And it's really building on previous efforts and resources that are currently available in the Pacific Island countries and territories. All of these activities can be standalone, and they will have an impact just by themselves, but they also work in a coherent manner towards 5 specific outcomes. And these are led by 5 main approaches. So some of the activities contribute to different outcomes. And again, the idea is really that all of these activities will outlive project cycle. For Kiwa or technical assistance, for instance, it is quite short-lived. We only have 1.5 years, but we really hope that everything that we do in that time will have a lasting effect, and that will remain within the region and within all our partners. So they've been organized as well following the 4 stakeholder groups that Sarah and her team identified and that Ludovic reminded. So first, going for the objective of mainstreaming nature-based solutions into policy first, with this recognition that, as Francois also highlighted, it is still a new concept and it's not well understood yet. There is still a lot of awareness needed around the concept, but also how it can be used in a variety of policy sectors, for instance, across really a whole range of policy outcomes to avoid the silo, and also try to step out of the business as usual of not considering nature-based options. And so for the decision makers, so the sort of the higher level public authorities, the idea is really to provide more information to these high level stakeholders on nature-based solution potential. And the type of information that Sarah highlighted was important to convey this importance of nature-based solutions is, for instance, to present the socioeconomic advantages of using nature-based solutions, highlighting the role of healthy ecosystems in achieving a variety of policy objectives, something that we obviously as SPREP keep highlighting as well, highlighting their importance to to resilient communities, and also sharing successes and lessons learned from the Pacific. So seeing that where it has worked, that it's not so innovative, or that it can be done, and this information should be conveyed in a variety of formats and media, such as conferences, massive open online learning courses, webinars, or policy briefs. So that's one of the first activities that's recommended for the decision makers. For local communities, again, to support the uptake of nature-based solutions and their mainstreaming into resilience building, it's really more about making the link in all our capacity development activities with local, indigenous, and traditional knowledge and practices, so that communities are really empowered to appropriate the concept, and also making the link to the nature-based solutions concept and linking it to traditional natural resources management and all the capacity building activities around this awareness raising should really aim at supporting peer-to-peer learning and the intergenerational transmission of that knowledge. And so this can be done through, for instance, a local training of trainers program, where you enable local trainers, especially in areas where there is not so much access to more formal education providers, having local trainers that are able to make that link between the local context, the practices, and the NBS framework and the best practices that come with it. And to support these local trainers, the idea would be to develop or redevelop learning and teaching resources for primary school, acknowledging that primary school is really where a lot of the communities get their education from, and for community use in general, without reinventing the wheel. So we know that there are quite a lot of great tools available. There's the learning about climate change the Pacific way. So this could be a short-term activity with quite a lot of benefits. For capacity development in itself, really having skills to implement nature-based solutions. As a reminder, the two main target groups where the nature-based solutions managers, the people who will be in charge of sort of developing the projects, and monitoring their implementation, and technical personnel, which are really the practitioners, the people who will be doing the work on the ground. And really the key point for all the capacity development activities recommended is to embed them into formal regional qualifications, if possible, and really just stepping away from the ad hoc training approach and supporting really the local embedding of training resources and skills. In terms of the main themes and the thematic areas where these capacity development activities should focus on for the NBS managers, where it is around good project development and management for nature-based solutions for climate change adaptation projects. And that includes monitoring and evaluation. That's a challenge for everyone that we've highlighted in most of our Kiwa projects. So it's quite a key part of project management, but generally speaking, just accessing finance, awareness around the NBS standards and criteria, the integration of gender equity and social inclusion, financial management, all these aspects. And for the practitioners, the challenge, and I think Sarah talked to it in her introduction, is that nature-based solutions are quite a broad umbrella term and they are landscape and seascape specific, community specific. So they can really have a very different and very broad need for very technical skills. But the subject areas that really came across most strongly for specific focus related to forestry, agriculture, fisheries, and again, the support to local indigenous and traditional knowledge. So one of the recommended approaches for capacity development, and this can benefit both the managers and the practitioners, is to upskill management their skills in their priority identified needs via formal courses. So Sarah talked about it previously. So formal meaning regionally accredited, longer processes is usually up to, for instance, 400 hours, not full degrees, but still qualifications in themselves and credits, and non-formal professional training. So some of the activities recommended are to develop and deliver micro qualifications or professional short courses on the priority needs, and have cohort trainings for managers and technical practitioners on the group. So Ludo talked a bit about the recommended delivery modes of being face-to-face. Then it's just up to each project. And then it's just up to each project to see what fits their budget. The other two activities are to integrate nature-based solutions into the regional certificates 1 to 6 in resilience. So these qualifications are already available. Actually, they're well used. A lot of practitioners and managers in the region have certificates in resilience, often from USP. These are regional certifications and accredited. And there's an opportunity in those existing qualifications to integrate more nature-based solutions into their resilience component. Another alleyway would be to develop technical and vocational education training on nature-based solutions for climate adaptation. So having, again, a full set of regional qualifications from certificates 1 to 6, with all more specific learning and teaching resources. And this obviously takes a long time. Ludovic mentioned even for macro qualifications, it takes a while as well. So this is more like a medium-term strategy for capacity development partners in the region. A fourth recommended approach, targeting more practitioners and the need to have sort of locally available capacity, both as skills, but also as capacity to teach those skills in a locally relevant context. And for this, the recommended approach is to provide a training of trainers for non-formal upskilling of managers, technical and community stakeholders, so that will then benefit from this training. So developing the activities involved in that will be a training of trainers program, informed by an inventory or having a database of locally trained teachers and trainers that are available to assist with education and non-formal awareness raising on nature-based solutions for climate change adaptation, so that any projects in looking at doing capacity development or awareness raising in the region can use these actually quality assured teachers and trainers to support quality activities. And again, this training of trainers could build on all the courses and the courses material already developed through previous activities. And then finally, another also longer term solution to improve capacity and community resilience is to work through schools and curriculums. So for us, for instance, this is quite outside of our scope, but I think this is very important findings. And it talks as well to reality in many countries, even in France, where I come from, that there is quite a lot of inequality in access to resilience and climate change information, where often these are only studied at the end of secondary levels in high school with the scientific pathways. And this is something that youth groups in the region have been advocating as well, to really embed resilience and nature-based solutions at the primary and secondary levels where most people get their education from in the region. And this can start by an analysis of the alignment of Pacific Island countries and territories school curricula with all the national and regional policies on resilient development, and where needed, redesign those to ensure that resilience and nature-based solutions are included. Again, the idea is to support these efforts and provide the initial teaching resource and learning resources for primary school use based on existing documentation. So again, this is quite a long-term strategy. Redesigning school curricula, it requires a lot of partnership and of advocacy, but ultimately this is also the most sustainable way to build capacity on NBS and resilience in general. So throughout the approaches, we've highlighted the importance of local, indigenous, and traditional knowledge. This is really one of the specific recommendations, especially in a region where we think that we have a great contribution to make on this topic by showing what is already being done, and especially in all the traditional environmental and resources management systems that exist. A second specific recommendation that comes out very clearly and strongly from the report is on gender equity, disability, and social inclusion. So I'll just say GEDSI for short. And so these GEDSI issues we know now are really coming to the forefront of a lot of our projects, a lot of our programs. But we have the objectives, but we don't necessarily have the understanding and the capacity to actually implement those and to effectively integrate them into nature-based solutions projects. And so really a strong recommendation from the report is that any capacity development program for nature-based solutions, but in general, should have a GEDSI strategy. And this strategy should really talk to the content, so systematically including gender equity, disability, and social inclusion components in any course material, technical, just to ensure that the understanding and the socialization of these concepts, but also Ludovic talked to this a bit by highlighting some of the barriers to accessing climate change. It's also in the format and ensuring that capacity development activities are designed in a gender and disability and social inclusion sensitive manner. So that's a challenge. The report provides quite a few insights already on how to do it or how to not do it as well. This is something that really came strongly from the report, and under our Kiwa initiative, this is an area where we're particularly happy to work forward and to provide more resources to the region. So in the executive summary and then in the report, you'll see all these 10 activities presented in a format that we thought would be very practical and actionable, presenting the budget estimated, the time frame as well, the target beneficiaries, and the estimated impact and outcomes. So it's quite a useful tool. And in the next section, we'll talk more about which areas from these recommendations Kiwa will focus on. But I'll stop here for the recommendations and maybe answer a few of the of the questions in the chat. So I have a question from Kiwa about the difference between blue or green, gray infrastructure and nature-based solutions. And is nature-based solutions solely on nature measures or can include engineering measures if talking about coastal protection and management? So thank you. I think this is a key topic and very crucial point for our common understanding of nature-based solutions because there's nature-based solutions can take time, especially and sometimes we don't have it, especially for coastal protection or management. Nature-based solutions is an umbrella term, as we understand it, that can include blue, green, and gray infrastructure as actions or approaches. The key thing with nature-based solutions, really, as Ludovic mentioned, is that it is an action on ecosystems. It has to have an impact on ecosystems and a positive impact for biodiversity as well. So engineering measures can be included as nature-based solutions as long as they also contribute to ecosystem health and resilience. So this is how we understand nature-based solutions. And I think there will be great examples in the region on how do we do it actually? How do we include more nature into coastal protection and management? And we have some Kiwa projects working on it already, and we'll be happy to share challenges and experiences. Just noting that in the Kiwa activities that we plan, green infrastructure, especially for coastal protection, will be a key theme that we'll look at. Oops. So, for François's question, could you please clarify? Yeah, I'll let Sarah answer this one. Sorry, I'll let Sarah answer this one on the clarification of the meaning of decision makers. Yeah. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, yeah. So hi, Francois. Happy to assist with this one, Mathilde. So one of the things we were asked to do as part of the needs and gaps and analysis was to identify capacity building opportunities for mainstreaming nature-based solutions approaches in climate change adaptation and other relevant sectoral policies and strategic frameworks. So where we're classifying decision makers, we are essentially referring to people that would be directly involved in policy making. So that would be high-level government people, high-level civil service people, politicians, crop agencies themselves, and also consultants that would work on anything to do with like the community participatory approaches to developing policy, to make sure that everybody's aware of what nature-based solutions are. So like a huge amount of awareness would be for those like decision makers, but also ensuring that nature-based solutions on any part of those processes would filter down and have some community context. So a lot of the, quite a few of the conclusions and quite a few of the interviews and surveys, etc., pointed towards putting nature-based solutions into context in all those different levels. But specifically, decision makers does in the context of the needs and gap analysis apply specifically to people that are involved in making policy. That doesn't exclude the other groups that you've mentioned. So you've talked about civil society and chiefs in traditional governance, etc., NGOs and leaders. They're covered in the different categories. So decision makers is specifically for mainstreaming NBS into policy. So I hope that answers your question. And again, I talk too much, sorry. Okay, thanks.
No worries. Thank you, Sarah. And now we'd like to invite you for your reactions or questions again. We have also a few, again, mentee questions that we can share to guide reactions. I might just share them now, actually. So thank you. So our first question was from the five specific outcomes that we highlighted. That was to contextualize the concept, raise awareness to decision makers, upskill managers, having trained trainers available, and school curriculum realignment. Well, it's quite, I think, except maybe for the fifth, we think all of them are quite important. So that's also good to know. But yeah, okay. So what we see for now, I guess, is that the most pressing would be awareness raising for decision makers and for communities. So having this double look, well, it's good because we'll talk about our our program for Kiwa. So that's reassuring for us as well. I think we had a second question. And this is related more to actually upskilling. A lot of you are actually our target groups for most capacity development. And the question was, I'm trying to see. Yeah, sorry, it doesn't really appear on the slides, but it was between having no time to a couple of hours here, number one, to about 10 hours, I think. And then it went up to a couple of weeks, couple of a month, and up to several months for an actual full qualification. So it's actually good to see that a lot of you are willing to spend quite a lot of time actually to learn more about nature-based solutions. And I think this is important to see that there's an appetence, there's a need, and people are ready to invest in those areas. And this is for next. So maybe, Ludo, can we go directly into the presentation of the program, because I don't see any hands raised. Thank you again for all your questions on the recommendations. I'll so these are, we're happy now to present our program. So as mentioned, this was quite a broad report and broad work, and quite ambitious in its vision as well, and menu of activities. Under our technical assistance component that SPREP and SPC are jointly implementing. This is we're only going until 2020, early 2025 for now. So we only have 1 year and a half, and we have limited budget. So what we really tried to do is select activities that were coherent with our respective mandates, and where we thought that we could have the highest and longer lasting added value for capacity development, and that we could actually, so we sort of focused on also providing the tools that will support then other capacity development programs. So these are indicative at the time. We're still in discussions with our donors, trying to have the most consensus-based approach on this. But I can talk to some of the main orientations that we've chosen for our program. And the first is on awareness raising. So we've just seen before that awareness is still thought as sort of the first step, I guess, or the most pressing issue for nature-based solutions. And this is something that we would like to work on for decision makers, for instance. We want to share those key messages around nature-based solutions, their potential for policy implementation, and but also providing opportunities to learn more and go deeper. So we want to do a range of awareness raising activities that goes from the policy brief, maybe from the higher level, sharing with your colleagues that are not in the environmental field. We want to also have a more detailed online interactive guide on nature-based solutions for climate change adaptation, so that we can have a more specific, focused, and relevant understanding of what are NBS, what are the concepts, maybe building on IUCN's guidance, but also really adding to the region needs and what we've already learned in implementing nature-based solutions. And then finally, we also want to develop a longer, more detailed, self-paced, massive, online open learning course on nature-based solutions for climate adaptation that will build on our existing platforms in the region, and that will be obviously accessible to all. So that's our main ideas for decision makers. We also want to work with communities on this crucial aspect of socializing and supporting actually local, indigenous, and traditional knowledge through the redevelopment of community awareness material, building on what's existing. A key material is the learning about climate change the Pacific way, for instance. That was very useful, and that could be a great basis for this work. But we also want to do something a bit also more fun and more broadly engaging, and having a social media campaign that will help participants from the region promote, hopefully in their own languages, on local, indigenous, and traditional knowledge. Try to engage all our Kiwa communities, but obviously open to all, and just so we can have a more grassroots emerging of what nature-based solutions actually look like in the region. So for now, these will be jointly delivered by SPREP and SPC, and we hope to have all of this available in early 2024. Yeah, thank you, Ludo. I'll let you go on as well, Ludo, for the more capacity side.
Thank you so much, Mathilde. So as explained by Mathilde, the first component will be about awareness. The second component will be about more real capacity development, technical capacity development. To reach this objective, based on the recommendation from these regional assessments, we are looking at two main activities. The first one being training of trainers program. As we already explained, either for formal or non-formal training, there is still a lack of local trainers available to provide contextualized training. So we would like to increase that opportunity through Kiwa project as well. Ideally, we wanted to first develop the micro qualification that I will present just afterwards, and train the trainers on this specific micro qualification. But in terms of timeline, it might be a bit challenging. So thankfully, there is already some resourcing existing. And I'm thinking, first of all, about USP, has like an already successful training of trainers program. And we could use and update some of this material. So that's an idea. We are also looking at other opportunities. I engaged recently with the Vanuatu National University. We're also about to launch, and that has been identified in our regional assessment, a resilience course as well. And so we are now engaging with them and we need to organize further discussion to see how we could link these existing resources to be useful and to be adapted for our objectives. We talked about the sustainability, which is a key question, and this is why we wanted to develop micro qualification or professional short courses, thanks to the support we can receive from our ECAP division, the Educational Quality Assessment Program at SPC. Why we are going this way? It's been recommended by the team of consultants also as a good opportunity to ensure sustainability. For those who may not be familiar with this micro qualification activities, let's say. First of all, anything that is below 400 hours of learning is qualified as a micro qualification. Our idea for us is to look at about 30 or 40 hours micro qualification component that will present and that will be based on project development and project management for nature-based solution. The way it is presented in this slide doesn't really reflect what we have in mind. We don't want to have a module or a short course on project development, one on project management, and one more technical. The idea is to have one big micro qualification that cover these three topics. How can we develop nature-based solution project for climate change adaptation, and how can we more efficiently manage them and specifically monitor them? There's still a long way to go to efficiently monitor nature-based solution. So that's why what we want to do. Again, if we are going with this ECAP and regional macro qualification, one of the advantage is that it will remain over time, meaning that once this macro qualification is developed, and I will get back quickly on how we will develop it. Once it's developed and it's made available, any training provider in the region can use this micro qualification to deliver this training as they want. Because it's a micro qualification, we need to have a quality control as well. And this is one of the advantages as well. This quality control is made through our ECAP colleague, who are in charge of making sure that the right pedagogy is applied to this content. And also how we will develop this qualification is by appointing some industry advisory members for industry advisory committee. Basically, it's just gathering experts about this topic and training providers to together develop the content of this micro qualification. Once the qualification is done, you have this, what we call this blueprint, this framework. And after, any training provider will be able to deliver using their own resources as long as it match the requirement of the qualification. So first we will develop this micro qualification. We would like to make it with both experts and training providers. Rather than involving the providers at the end of the process, we want to involve them at the beginning, and together having this short qualification available by next year. We expect as soon as we will start that we will need about 6 months to develop this micro qualification through a few rounds of meetings. I will stop there because we're almost reaching the end of the meeting. But before going back to the Q&A session, I would like to emphasize that who will be the beneficiaries of this micro qualification courses. It will be broad. The entry point will be the Kiwa regional project and partners. And we want to specific target decision makers and project managers as well. But it will be thought on case-to-case basis. So I will stop there in order to collect your comments and further discuss. This is the last opportunity within this webinar to exchange and hearing what you have to say. So please don't be shy. We have like 10 to 15 minutes to do so. And please either take the floor or raise your question into the chat box. Thank you so much. So we have Kiribati Climate Change Department that confirm that they see it as a good opportunity to have capacity development for both project management and technical level. So this is what we will try to do to adapt our approaches, our modalities, and our content to the specific targets. We have Heidi from the Department of Environment from Cook Islands. Thank you for joining, Heidi. says that micro qualification sounds great. It's very interested to follow that development. So we will keep you posted on that. Oh, there is someone who raised his hand. I have a question from Wallis and Futuna, which is not directly related to that, but I'm just answering quickly about when it will be the next call for local project. It will be before the end of the year. Baptiste from Wallis and Futuna, I give you the floor. We can't hear you, Baptiste. No, you seem to be on mute. Could you please write your question in the chat, Baptiste? Very sorry.
Can you hear me better
no,
now?
perfect. Now it's working.
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, I'm Baptiste. I'm the project facilitator for fisheries and agriculture and project Protège. So first of all, yeah, thanks everyone for your presentation, full of hope. And yeah, so as you know, like few things I noted, like from the findings of the studies are the lack of data and also the difficulty to secure funding, like long-term fundings to develop nature-based solutions. So as you know, our project Protège is coming to an end, and we are strongly trying to sustain our actions. So one thing I'm convinced is that capacity building and raising awareness will help us to fill the gaps between fundings, because I'm not sure we'll get fundings in next few years for fisheries at least. So, and I also strongly agree with the fact of not reinventing the wheel. We developed lots of things, SPC developed lots of things, and I think also 1.5 years is really short. So like getting all the tools and also like lots of tools developed for awareness raising are available, and I think it's just a matter of gathering them and making sure it fits in the framework of a nature-based solution, and maybe we can also like train training the trainers is also a good thing, because we notice it. We really struggle to get communities to develop projects. So I think getting them to write proposals and things will really help to develop new projects in the region. Yeah, so it was just a comment. Thanks.
Merci, Baptiste. Thank you, Baptiste, for the great feedback. Yeah, well, the issue as well of having all the information available on nature-based solutions. So Kiribati also mentioned, yeah, that it is difficult to follow and to consistently receive information on nature-based solutions. Through Kiwa, the Kiwa website, we really try to build on this website to be a repository of best practices in different thematic areas, and also sharing all the news for these type of events as well. So yeah, I'll just let you take the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for the presentation. So very informative and a lot of things that we learned from. So I have one question about the personnel areas that we see in your presentation. So it's more on the forestry, the agriculture, and fisheries. But I was asking for one area that also relevant to Kiribati about the solid waste management. Like we we see that this issue also affect the coastal and the marine life, and it will be our concern too in terms of how we can prevent or do other measures or engineering ways to prevent the solid waste impact on our coastal and marine. So we learned from some studies that sedimentation is also impacted because of the life of these microorganisms in the coastal areas affected by the pollutants. So that's where we want to know if this area can also be considered for as one of technical area in addition to those forestry, agriculture, and fisheries. So yeah, that is just some ideas from me. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your comment. I think this is something that's also key in the way that SPREP, for instance, approaches ecosystem work, is that often waste management is a first step to ensure the sustainability and the efficiencies of nature-based solutions. It's not one of the key areas of nature-based solutions for sure, waste management, as nature-based solutions usually are more about direct actions to protect or restore or sustainably manage nature-based solutions. But as an integrated approach, it is really important to consider still waste management in any NBS project at your landscape level. So yeah, and if you have specific needs, Kiribati, on this aspect, we can also discuss directly. But thank you so much for your comment. I'll just briefly comment on some of the responses that we've had from the Mentimeter as well, and about the need as well to share best practices, peer-to-peer learning activities. It is difficult. It's something that we're trying to do at our small level between Kiwa regional projects, to share lessons learned between projects, and but it is difficult. It is also difficult sometimes to identify the best practices or the latest ways to have people that are able to train on that. But it's definitely something that is part of our work as well. And if we have great experiences to share on these, we'll be happy to do so on all our frameworks. I'll just stop here, I think. We went a bit over time, but we've tried to summarize more than 200 of very, very information-dense report. And it was great. We really wanted to share these findings broadly, to socialize this report, because we really think that it was helpful for us to develop our Kiwa activities, but we really wanted to have this tool available for the region to support our global effort towards protecting nature and addressing together these two crises of biodiversity loss and climate change adaptation, and to try to do better with the resource that we have in terms of capacity development and resilience building. So yeah, we really hope this was helpful, that you'll find the reading interesting as well when it is available. And please feel free to reach out to Ludovic and I for any further information regarding this work, to the Kiwa Secretariat for more information about the Kiwa initiative. As Ludovic mentioned again, the calls for regional and for local projects should open before the end of the year. So please reach out to us as well, and to IUCN for the local projects if you have project ideas that you would like to explore. And I'll just stop here and thank you again for keeping up with us, and thank you to the interpreters, and apologize for if I wasn't clear or easy to translate. Thank you again, Sarah, and all your team for all your effort, and to all the respondents who participated in this group effort. And yeah, thank you all, and have a great day. Merci.